In a dusty border town, the marketplace was alive with noise, horses trading, rifles bartered, blankets exchanged, and sometimes, tragically, people. Among the captives stood a young Apache woman, her wrists bound yet her gaze steady, refusing to break. Men circled like vultures, shouting bids. To most, she was a prize of conquest. To one man, standing quietly in the shadows, she was something else entirely. Samuel Carter, a rancher with weary eyes, stepped forward. When the auctioneer barked for bids, Samuel's voice cut through the chaos. "I'll take her," he said firmly, silencing the mocking laughter around him. The transaction was swift, coins exchanged, and the woman was released into Samuel's custody. The crowd whispered, some with curiosity, others with derision. "Foolish rancher," someone muttered. Samuel ignored them. He walked slowly beside her, ensuring she could keep pace. Her bare feet pressed into the dust, her chin held defiantly high. When he handed her a water flask, she hesitated before drinking, suspicious of his motives. She would not give him the satisfaction of gratitude. To her, he was yet another captor. To the townsfolk, he was a man wasting coin. To himself, Samuel knew his reasons. At his ranch, Samuel offered her food and a blanket. He untied her wrists, surprising her with freedom of movement. She stayed apart, sitting near the doorway like a sentinel. Samuel made no demands, no orders, no attempts to claim her beyond the paper that now bound her name to his. She watched him work, her sharp eyes noting the way he treated his horses with patience, never with cruelty. At night, coyotes howled in the distance, filling the silence between them. He had bought her with money, but he carried no desire to chain her spirit. Samuel's past weighed heavily on him. Once, he had worn a soldier's coat, fighting in battles where villages burned and families were torn apart. The cries of children haunted his nights. He had taken lives, including those of her people, and the shame festered within him like a wound that never healed. Buying her had not been an act of ownership, it was an act of redemption. He wanted to protect, not destroy. But he wondered if she could ever see beyond the scars of war to the man who now sought only to guard what he once harmed. Days passed, and her silence remained unbroken. One morning, Samuel discovered her standing on the ridge beyond the corral, her gaze fixed on the mountains. The horizon seemed to call her home. He approached slowly, carrying bread in his hand. "You're free to run," he said softly, "but out there are soldiers and bounty hunters. You won't last long." She turned, her eyes sharp. "Then why buy me?" she asked at last, her voice halting in unfamiliar English. Samuel hesitated, searching for words. "Because I see you," he replied, "not as they do, but as you are." Her name came later, Ayana, meaning eternal blossom. When she offered it, her voice carried strength, as if daring him to misuse it. Samuel spoke it carefully, never twisting it into something it wasn't. Slowly, fragile trust began to grow. She began feeding chickens, carrying water, sometimes mending leather straps. But she did so on her own terms, never at his command. Neighbors whispered louder with each passing week. The ranchers gone soft, they mocked. Samuel ignored them. For the first time in years, his house felt less like a hollow shelter and more like a place where life stirred. Ayana studied Samuel closely. She noticed his patience with animals, the way he gave more to her plate than to his own when food was scarce, and the nights he spoke softly into the darkness as though confessing sins to unseen ears. She did not forgive easily, but she recognized a man carrying the weight of conscience. He was unlike those who had mocked her people, unlike those who reduced them to shadows. Still, the pain of her captivity and the memory of her people's suffering remained sharp, and trust could not blossom overnight. One evening, drunken men from town rode up to Samuel's gate. "Where's the Apache girl?" they sneered, their eyes glinting with cruelty. Samuel stood firm, rifle steady in his grip. "She's under my protection," he declared. The men laughed, calling him a traitor, threatening to take her by force. But Samuel's stance did not falter. At last, muttering curses, they left. Inside, Ayana had witnessed everything. For the first time, she realized Samuel had risked his standing, his safety, even his life, to shield her. Something in her chest shifted, though she tried to keep her expression stone. Winter swept across the land with unforgiving cold. Snow piled against the ranch walls, supplies dwindled, and Samuel fell ill with fever. Weak and shivering, he could barely rise from bed. Ayanna, without hesitation, took charge. She chopped wood, fed the animals, and nursed him day and night. She placed cool cloths on his forehead, whispering prayers in her own tongue, songs her mother once sang in times of hardship. Samuel, half-conscious, could not understand the words, but he felt their strength. In those long weeks, they became not master and captive, but two souls bound by survival. When spring returned, Samuel's strength came back slowly. One morning he found Ayanna by the river, singing softly. The melody was haunting, full of sorrow. "It's beautiful," he said. She shook her head. "It is mourning," she replied quietly. "For her people, for her lost freedom, for a life that could never return." Samuel's heart ached. He could not undo history, nor erase wounds carved deep by violence and betrayal. But he vowed silently to offer her something different, a space where healing, however fragile, might take root. Perhaps that was all a man like him could give. Their bond deepened in small, unspoken ways. She taught him words of her language, he taught her how to ride bareback across the open plain. Laughter, faint but real, began to echo at the ranch. Yet, danger still lingered beyond their fences. Soldiers patrolled, rounding up tribes, forcing them into camps far from their homelands. Fear weighed heavy on Ayanna's heart. One evening she asked, "If they come?" Samuel looked into her eyes, steady and unflinching. "Then I'll hide you. They won't take you." She studied his face, searching for lies, but found only truth. Storm clouds gathered one night when riders appeared at the gate, soldiers demanding entry. "We hear you harbor an Apache," their captain barked. Samuel stood tall, rifle in hand. "There's no one here for you," he said firmly. Behind him, Ayanna clutched a knife, her breath steady despite her fear. Rain pelted down, lightning splitting the sky. For tense minutes, no one moved. At last, the soldiers turned away, unwilling to spill blood in a storm. Samuel lowered his rifle, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Ayanna looked at him then, truly seeing the man who had risked everything for her. In the silence after the storm, Ayanna touched his arm, her hand trembling. "Why risk all?" she whispered. Samuel's eyes glistened. "Because buying you was never about owning you. It was about saving what I could. I couldn't save them before, but I could save you." For the first time, her guarded heart softened. She saw not a soldier, not a captor, but a man haunted by regret and yearning for redemption. In that moment, the walls between them cracked, allowing something fragile but undeniable to grow, respect, and perhaps the first glimmer of love. As the seasons turned, life on the ranch settled into rhythm. Ayanna chose to stay, no longer out of necessity but out of will. Together they worked side by side, planting, herding, and building a life from the earth itself. The townsfolk still whispered, but Samuel paid them no mind. Ayanna walked freely, her head high, no longer a captive but a partner. And in her presence, Samuel found peace he thought forever lost. Their bond had not erased the scars of the past, but it had created something rare in a time of division, understanding. On a quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Ayanna sat beside Samuel on the porch. The land stretched wide before them, golden in the fading light. She thought of her people, of loss and survival, of the strange road that had led her here. Samuel broke the silence. "Do you ever wish you'd run?" She considered, then shook her head. "I was not bought," she said softly, her voice steady. "I was found." And with those words, the past's shadows lifted slightly, replaced by the fragile but enduring light of a shared tomorrow.